Hello everyone, welcome to this webinar on creating an effective study plan to score 700 plus on GMAT. I'm Piyush and I'm going to be your main host in the webinar today. But before I proceed, I would like to know if all of you can hear me loud and clear. So please respond to this poll if you guys can hear me loud and clear. That way I will get to know that my voice is good to go forward and then I can get started. So let me know if you guys can hear me. So this is good. More and more people. So really nice to see all of you today over here, and I can see almost all of you can hear me clearly. So this is great. So let me actually get to know you a little more as well, and I'll also tell about myself. So please tell me, like, since how long have you been preparing for the GMAT? So again, I've created a poll for the same. So let me know in the poll that since how long have you been preparing for GMAT? Just share your thoughts or just like current status in the poll here. That way I'll get to know. So since how long have you guys been preparing for the GMAT? Let's see. Okay, that will help me understand the overall batch better. Okay, I see some words coming in. Good. And this is going to be a really interesting webinar, really exciting webinar where we're going to tell you really how you can actually create an effective study plan to get done with the GMAT in the first attempt itself, so that you don't really need to go for multiple attempts and you really don't waste your time on doing some things which are not as effective overall. So we are going to talk about this in depth overall. Now, so great. I see the votes have stabilized now. So let me end the poll. So I see about 60, 66, 64%, about 2/3 of the batch is either yet to start or have just started. Like they're into the prep less than 1 month. And some people, about 12%, have been preparing for more than 6 months, but majority of you are very fresh in your prep. So again, this webinar is ideally for people who are starting their prep or are in the first couple of months of their prep. But even if you have started your prep long back, let's say 5 or 6 months back, there are a lot of learnings which will be there in the webinar with respect to what GMAT really tests you on. So this is not a typical webinar where I'm just going to tell you, okay, to create a study plan, you need to do this, you need to do that. We'll also understand how the GMAT really functions, because unless we understand that, it's very, very difficult for us to actually understand what are the skills that are needed. And unless we understand the skills, it is difficult to create a study plan for ourselves. And let me quickly tell you a little about myself. I'm Piyush. Those of you who don't know me, I'm a strategy expert at GMAT-Viz at present. I have 8+ years of experience of mentoring students targeting MBA from top tier 1 schools globally. So I have a lot of experience in helping students out reach their target schools. I have prepared for and taught for CAT and GMAT, both the tests. So CAT is an Indian version of GMAT. You can think of it like that. And I've prepared for both, taught for both. As a student, I understand what are the pain points. And as a teacher, I understand what are the, like, I could experience many people and I could see what works for some people, what doesn't work for others. So I have a very rich experience in that field. I've scored a 740 on GMAT myself with a Q50 and a verbal 41, and a 99.9 percentile on CAT. I like analyzing trends and data to come up with strategies, and I love really looking at data points, especially the ESR reports, to help students understand what are their strengths and weaknesses and how can they improve their scores significantly. So this is a little about me. And in this webinar, I'm going to talk from my experiences about the key things that you need to keep in mind while creating that study plan for yourself. Okay, so there will be 3 parts to this webinar. Very quickly, we will first talk about who we are at GMAT-Viz, what is that we do. I won't be even taking 5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes on that. Then the main part of the webinar is going to go for about 80 minutes or so, where we are going to talk about the study plan part. And then in the end, we will be opening it for an open-ended Q&A. So you guys can ask any questions that you have in the third part of the webinar. During the webinar, also feel free to put your questions in the chat. I'm more than happy to take them up. But I've dedicated a Q&A section also towards the end. Okay, so very quickly, what do we do at GMAT-Viz? So GMAT-Viz is world's only truly personalized course. So many courses in the world claim to be personalized or adaptive, but GMAT-Viz is the only course which has the capability of serving different content to different users based on their strengths and weaknesses. And all of that is done to you with a proper personalized study plan. So think of it like this, that GMAT-Viz is on a mission to make learning simple for everyone. Simplifying learning with AI is our logo. And how we do it is, we believe that students should only focus on studying. They should not be worried about creating a plan, what to do next. If you're waking up in the morning or studying after your office hours, you should not worry about what should I do today. So every week you get a simplified task list, which is personalized for you. It's not a templatized task list. It's a personalized task list that you get through our automated platform, automated AI platform. And this task list gets changed every single week based on your progress, based on the time that you're putting in, based on your weaknesses, strengths, and all of that. In fact, the entire course is adaptive. And that's why we have the capability of serving you real-time improvement modules based on your strengths and weaknesses. As and when the AI realizes that you're going wrong in some areas, it will automatically serve you those improvement modules right then and there. And all the students who enroll for our complete package, which is the verbal plus quant package, also get dedicated mentors assigned to them, to whom they can connect every 15 days for about a 15-20 minutes call, where the mentors will assess their performance based on the performance on the platform and suggest them anything which the AI is not able to communicate to them. And this is a service which is provided by us, and this is a very valued service because the mentors who are assigned to you are not call center executives. They are people who have great experience of helping students in GMAT and have scored a 700 plus themselves. Okay, so that is why we are today one of the most effective course of GMAT Club. In fact, we are the most effective course, not just one of the most effective course, when it comes to average score improvement. So as of today, our average score improvement stands at 111 points, whereas the average score improvements of some of the other competitors are very, very far behind us overall. Okay, so that was about GMAT-Viz. Now let's get to the main part of the webinar. So I saw that about 60%, 66% of you were just started, they have just started or they get to start. So this question is to you guys. How have you started your GMAT prep? Can you guys tell me, how have you started your GMAT prep? What are the things that you're doing today for your GMAT prep? Okay, and please don't feel shy. Whatever you are doing right now, just tell me what are you doing as of now. What is the strategy that you guys are following? And guys, I want this to be a two-way webinar. I don't want it to be a one-way communication where I am the only one who is speaking. Obviously, I won't allow you guys to speak because then it will be very difficult to manage. But yeah, you can feel free to post your responses in the chat. I'll be very, very happy to see them. Okay, so Lakshmi says, I'm using Manhattan Guides for foundations. Dawn says, I took a mock test. Shyami says, I'm following GMAT guidelines. Says, studying the core topics from now. Keshav says, OG. Pranjali says, I'm taking one chapter at a time in maths. Okay. What about other people? Manhattan, yes, says Manhattan, official GMAT, official guide. Nikunj, official guide and practice questions. Kaplan GMAT prep is what Nishant is using. Okay. Abhishek is started to studying with official guides. Looking for topics where I'm weak. Samiksha is saying, okay. Practicing quant questions from the OG Shreya. Shemai OG. Okay. So two common things I see is mocks and then basically official guide. Okay. These are the two common things which I am hearing. Jayan says, I'm studying verbal from GMAT-Viz. Okay, Jayan. Happy to know that. Let's see. So how do most people start their prep? The first thing most people do is they take a mock test. Okay. They take a mock test to understand where they are. And then they mostly start their prep without any planning of a study plan. They don't create a personalized study plan. Even if they take a study plan that is a templatized study plan, which is available freely on the websites, I have no problem with those templatized study plans. I'm not saying they're not great. It's just that it's not as effective as a personalized study plan. So you need to have personalized study plan, which have clear targets. Every week what is supposed to be done, but very few people do this planning. People get directly into studying, and the biggest mistake that they do is they start with the OG. Okay, OG and Funny is saying I started with OG, but I learned OG is for practice, but not building concepts. So very true, Funny, and that's the thing which many people realize too late in their prep. Official guide is a question bank, guys. That's a question bank. It is not good for building concepts. And forget about concepts. The biggest problem is people don't focus on application of those concepts or the right strategies. Official guide does not teach you those strategies. Official guide is supposed to be done only after you work on your concepts and applications. And in the webinar, I'm going to tell you what is to be done, how it is to be done. So don't worry about that. Okay. All of that is going to be covered. But the biggest mistake people do is they start preparing without any personalized plan. They'll just take the OG or some of the books and just learn the concepts. And then their focus is solely on solving more and more questions. And the problem is when you start with OG or you take too many resources for your prep, your sole focus is accuracy, not building the right skills. And there are many myths which are around GMAT. Many people think that, okay, if they have a better accuracy, they're going to score well on GMAT. But that's not completely true. I'm not saying it's false, but it's not completely true either. And I'm going to break some of those myths, because unless you understand like what is the real scenario, then you'll fall for those myths and your prep will not be great. Okay, so I'll talk about the myths as well, but let's quickly let me give you an overview of how we are gonna take you through the entire part of the webinar today. Okay, so in simple terms, if you want to score a 720 plus kind of a score or 700 plus kind of a score, there are 4 steps that you need to follow. The first step, which very, very few people do, if you really plan your studies well, you actually get a very big edge over any of the other students, because it actually is at least 20 to 30% of your task done. So planning is very critical. You need to start with planning, and I'm going to delve deeper into each of these areas. I'm just giving you an overview with respect to how we have structured this entire webinar. So we'll first talk about the planning aspect. How do you create a study plan? How do you break down your target score into quant and verbal, and how should you go about your prep in a planned way? Okay. Then we will quickly talk about how do you execute this plan that you have created. And when it comes to execution, there are 2 very important aspects to it: concepts and application. We'll talk about both of them. And this is where I'll also talk about certain myths which are prevailing in the market. Like many people actually come across this things. They think these are important lessons, but they are actually myths. So we will break some myths so that you are not falling for those things. And that way you can actually execute well. And when you're executing, it is very important that you continuously assess yourself. You focus on assessing, understanding how you're doing, how you're performing. And when you're doing those assessments, you work on your details, how to optimize your areas, once you understand that there are certain areas that you're not so good at. Okay, so this is an overview of the entire thing. So let me quickly ask you guys another question. How many of are you guys excited to know about all these 4 steps now? Are you excited? And again, this is a rhetorical question, guys. I want all of you to say yes to me, because I'm expecting that. So are you guys excited to know about these 4 steps? How do you go about all these 4 steps? Quick yes, no in the poll. Okay, good. Again, as I said, this is a rhetorical question. I know all of you are going to say yes, so that's good. So let's talk about the 4 steps now. So let's start with planning. So I'm sure most of you would have identified what your target score is. Let's say, like some people know that, okay, 700 is the target score. Some people say 720 is my target score. Some people say 740 is my target score. But you also need to break down the target score into sectional targets for yourself, like quant and verbal sectional targets. Now, if you already don't know about your target score, then there's a little bit of research that you need to do with respect to your profile, the target schools that you are looking at, their average scores and all of that. The general rule of thumb is, again, that's not the scope of the webinar, so I'm not going to get into a depth of it. So the general rule of thumb is, if your profile is excellent, you can get into your target school even if your score is 20 points below the average. If your profile is just about average, you probably need 20 points more than the average score of the respective target school that you have. And you have to look at the average score of your competition, like your representative pool. For example, if you are from India or China, which are overrepresented pools, your average score is generally 20 points higher than the average score of the entire batch. So those factors are taken into account, but as I said, that's not the scope of the webinar. So do your research to understand your target score first, and then break it down into sectional targets for quant and verbal. Now, this is very important because sometimes people set unrealistic targets for themselves. So when you have to break it down into sectional targets for quant and verbal, there are 2 scenarios which are possible. One scenario is you're really good in one section. You're good in one section, but not so good in the other one. Okay, so one area is your strength, one area is your weakness. In that case, you should be maximizing your score in the stronger area. As much as possible, you should be maximizing your score there. The other scenario is you're good in both sections. Now, let me put it this way, that you're equally good in both sections. Okay. In that case, you should go about balancing the target. Okay. Now, this might sound a little obvious to many people, but it is not that common. Many people don't do this planning at all. So let's take an example. Let's take an example of 720, which is a decent enough target score for most people. So let's see, if 720 is your target, how should you break it down into quant and verbal targets? So let's take the first scenario first. Let's say you are good in quant. Okay. In that case, if you're targeting a 720, your target scores in quant and verbal should be 50 and 38. Now, this is important. Why is this important? Because if you're targeting a 50 in quant vis-a-vis a 48 or a 47 in quant, the skills required are going to be very, very different. You're going to take your skill level to a very different level in that case. So this is very important for you to understand. However, if you're good in verbal, in that case, you should maximize your score in verbal, which like 43 is a good enough number to target in that case, and quant 46 also will do in that case. If you're equally good in both sections, it is better to target a quant 48 and a verbal 40, which is a balanced score, like 40, getting to a 48 and 40 are like at a similar skill level for people who are good in both sections. Okay, so this is how you should identify your target score. Now, once your target score is identified, you need to plan your studies. You need to focus in 3 phases. Like there are 3 general stages of learning that are there. And many people mix this entire stages. They don't have the stages of learning at all. In fact, in many cases, the first stage, which is the learning stage, is too short. Okay. Remember, guys, learning stage is the stage where you are going to learn both the concepts as well as the application of these concepts. I'm going to talk about both the aspects, application and concepts, both of them later on. But in this phase, you should be focusing on both concepts and application. And this phase should consume 60 to 70% of your effort. Okay, 60 to 70% of your effort should go on this phase where you're focusing on both the things. The common mistake which people do is they will not focus on application at all. They will only focus on concepts, and their time devoted to learning phase is generally 30 to 40% only. Okay, so you may ask, where did they spend most of their time? They actually spend most of the time in the fine-tuning phase. Fine-tuning phase is where your ideally time spent should be about 10 to 20, let me put it 15 to 20% actually of the entire time that you spend. But most people end up getting stuck in a certain score range, and they end up putting 40 to 50% of their time in this phase, which is wrong. Because if you are not doing the learning phase properly, you are going to invest a lot more time in the fine-tuning phase. And the problem is, even after investing this time, you're not going to get to your target score. Because if your basics are not in place, and when I say basics, I mean both concepts and application, not just the concepts. Many people think basics are just about concepts. I know all the concepts, my basics are in place. But that's not it. You need to have both the skills in place. If you do that properly, in the fine-tuning phase, you only need to focus on the weak areas. Okay, and it will be very easy for you to work on the weak areas. In fact, when I got to that 740, in that phase of my learning, I had to spend very little time on fine-tuning. But before that, when I was really struggling with scoring well on verbal, I spent a lot of time on fine-tuning, but I was not getting anywhere. So it's very important. Pranjali is saying, I have been doing that, focusing on concepts only. Pranjali, that happens with, trust me, more than 90% students. And this is not a statistic which I'm making up. This is from my personal experiences of talking to thousands of students in the last 1 year itself. Okay, and over the last 8 years, I have spoken to at least 10,000 students comfortably. So it's the biggest mistake that people do. And I'm going to talk about the application part as well. But this is how you should plan it. Like 60 to 70% of your focus goes to learning phase, 15 to 20% of your focus goes to fine-tuning phase. On only about 10 to 15% time you need to spend on your mock phase. So this is where you take mock tests and go about it. Most of the people will mix these 2 stages and will spend very little time on the learning phase. So you need to do this well. And let's talk about each of these phases now. So I'm first going to focus on the learning phase part. That, okay, how do you go about the learning phase? How do you plan for the learning phase? Because the planning for the fine-tuning phase and mock phase is basically kind of dependent on how you do your learning phase. So let's go about this. So in order to start your prep, it is very important that you understand what is the right sequence. Okay, should you start, how do you start with verbal, or how do you start with quant? What is that you do? And it is very easy for me, like when I speak to students and I make them explain the rationale behind a certain sequence that I'm suggesting, they understand what is the biggest mistake that they were doing. Most people don't follow a proper sequence. They will do SC on some days, they will do, and I'm going to first talk about verbal. That's why I'm taking this example. So many students come back and tell me that, okay, today how I prepare for verbal is on 2 days in a week, I prepare for sentence correction, a couple of days in the week, I prepare for critical reasoning, and a couple of days in a week, I prepare RC. That's how I'm doing it. Some people try to do all three things on the same day. But generally, that's what I have been seeing. Some people start with reading comprehension directly because they feel that's a weak area that they have. Some people start with CR. But what is the right way to start? What is the right sequence to follow? That's something which is not known to most people. So what we are going to do now is we are going to focus on what is the right sequence of study. And in order to help you understand that, we will first think about what are the skills that are tested on GMAT. Why is that important? It is important simply because if you understand what are the skills that are tested on GMAT, the sequence will actually become very, very logical and very natural for you. And then it will be very easy for you to focus on that sequence and work on that sequence. So let's see what are the skills that are tested on GMAT verbal. The first skill that is tested, and in fact, this is the single most important skill that is required. Okay, that is comprehension skills. Okay, you need to comprehend things correctly. And trust me, guys, many of you can tell me, okay, Piyush, comprehension skills, yeah, we can comprehend English. We have been speaking in English for quite some time. We have been writing English. It's like the first or second language that is there. But trust me, guys, many people comprehend, but they only comprehend 70-80% of it, of what is written. You need to comprehend exactly 100% of what is written. You need to contextualize things really, really well. That's the number one skill that is tested on GMAT verbal. The second skill which is tested on GMAT is analytical reasoning. Can you, given multiple pieces of information, can you relate those pieces of information and reason out whether there is the information which is provided or the conclusion which is drawn, is that logical or not? Are there any flaws? Are there any loopholes in the argument? That's the second skill which is tested. The third skill that is tested is how, if there is a lot of text given to you, can you focus on the main point? Can you focus on the intent of the text? Can you do it? That's the third skill which is tested on GMAT. Okay. And if I kind of map these three skills to the three sections which are there in verbal, SC, CR, and RC, you can see that the comprehension skill is the only skill which is tested in sentence correction. You can tell me, isn't grammar being tested on sentence correction, Piyush? You can ask that. But trust me, guys, even in grammar, in sentence correction of GMAT specifically, the rules that are tested are mostly meaning focused. And it is getting more and more meaning focused as days are going on, because that's what GMAT is doing. They're focusing on modifiers, parallelism, comparison, tenses, which are completely meaning focused things. And you cannot work on them unless you have your comprehension skills in place. So on top of the grammar concepts, you need to build the skill of comprehending things well. That's the only skill which is tested on sentence correction. The second, like in CR on the other hand, you don't just need to understand the meaning of individual sentences, you also need to relate that meaning with the other sentences to find the logical gaps. So in CR, there are two skills that are tested: comprehension as well as analytical reasoning. Okay. Now, in RC, on the other hand, you need all three skills, because you need to understand each sentence. You need to analytically reason. Is there a flaw? Is there a logical gap in the argument or not? And you also need to focus on the main point. What is the main intent of the author behind writing the piece of information that is written? Okay. Now, with this all three skills mapped to the three sections of verbal, SC, CR, and RC, what do you guys think should be the right sequence of studying verbal? How should we order these three sections? How should we go about these three sections? Which one should we do first? Which one should we do second? Which one should we do next? Tell me that in the chat here. What do you think, guys? I'll definitely tell you my point of view, but I want to see if you can actually come to a conclusion from this mapping. Okay? And tell me which is the right sequence and why do you think that is the right sequence? Okay, Aditi says SC followed by CR followed by RC. Okay, why do you think, Aditi, that makes sense? Pranjali says I think RC first makes more sense than CR than SC. Okay, Sabir says SC, CR, RC. Devik says the same. Shreya says the same. Trupti, Dhaval says the opposite. Udit says the same. Harshit says the same. Why do you guys think SC, CR, RC makes more sense, or RC, CR, SC makes more sense? Whatever is, like, why do you think that makes more sense, guys? Let me see your thoughts. Again, I want you to analytically reason with this argument, this information being provided. Good point, Don. But why does this sequence make more sense? Pranjali says RC takes a lot of time and covers all concepts, helps with others too. Okay. So Pranjali, think about this. If you have like a building which has 100 floors, do you directly jump to the 100th floor or you start from the first floor? Harshit says because of the step-by-step approach. Good point, Harshit. See, it's simple terms. If you start with sentence correction, okay, if you are starting with sentence correction, in that case, you just have to focus on building one skill at a time. Okay, you just have to focus on building one skill at a time. You don't have to worry about building all the 3 skills. Think about it the other way around. If you actually start from RC, we have to build all 3 skills at one go. It's gonna be really difficult. Imagine any new thing that you learned. Imagine when you learned swimming for the first time, the instructor did not ask you to think about like, let's say, breathing or floating and how do you kick and all of that in the first go. They gave you instructions for each of those things one step at a time. So it's much more easier, right? So if you do SC first and you actually understand the comprehension, like understand the sentences clearly, your comprehension skills are boosted. Once your comprehension skills are taken care of, then if you move to critical reasoning, then you just have to worry about analytical reasoning there. Okay, you just have to focus on the second skill. Okay, and once you do analytical reasoning properly and then you move to reading comprehension, then you just have to focus on main point. So these are 3 skills which will make it very easy for you to learn. Okay, Yuvali has a good point. Yuvali says start with a segment which is weakest for you. Strong and weak can be determined with diagnostics. Yes, good point, Yuvali. Again, this is, as I said, for those people who are just starting their prep. For people who are 2-3 months down the prep, like at least they have prepared for 2-3 months, I'm going to talk about the sequence for them as well, Yuvali, and I have a slide on that. Don't worry about that. We'll talk about that part. But for most of you, like I saw more than 65% people have just started or have not started at all. They're less than 1 month into their prep. For all of you, this is the sequence that you should follow. Okay, so tell me guys, how many of you thought of the sequence like this before the webinar today? Before joining the webinar, how many of you thought of sequencing your verbal like this? More importantly, more important than the sequence is the logic behind the sequence. Were you aware of this logic, that these are the 3 skills which are tested? Were you aware of this logic and did you think about rationalize it like this? Okay, quick yes, no guys, and please be very open and honest with me. Did you think about the sequence like this, rationalize it like this, that these are the 3 skills which are tested, and I'm gonna go about it like that. Okay, Aftab says that started with RC. Aditi says no. Yeah. And then trust me guys, I see many people doing this mistake. They kind of start with the wrong thing or they start focusing on all the things at the same time. Okay, Roshan says no. You guys can just answer in the poll as well. That will also be fine enough. Okay, Dhawal says started with RC because it's complex and tough and complex. So Dhawal, now I guess you are clear that how SC doing SC or CR first is going to help you. In fact, let me share with you guys. In the second half of my prep, second phase of my prep rather, when I actually tweaked my methodologies and focused on the right strategies, and that helped me improve to a 740, I did not focus on RC a lot. I used to struggle with RC big time and SC as well. CR was still better because I was probably better at analytical reasoning. But in the second phase, I did not focus a lot on RC. What I focused on was simply sentence correction. And that helped me significantly in RC. Just because there is a lot of interconnection. As I said, RC tests you on all 3 skills. So probably I was not good at comprehension, and focusing on main point became a natural thing for me. Okay, so that is something which is there. So Fabian, good point. I won't say SC is the hardest of all because of the language rules. I would say SC is the base thing in a way, because it's not about the language, Fabian. It's not about English that is tested on GMAT. It is more about the verbal reasoning, the meaning part of it. So if you're able to understand the meaning of anything in SC, that is going to help you in CR and RC. That contextual part is going to help you in CR and RC. Okay, and I'm going to talk about the rules part as well. So let's still get going because we need to talk about a lot of stuff. So I'm sure all of you now understand the importance of this, and I'm happy to see that I could help you, because 76% of you are not aware of this before the webinar. I'm really happy that I could help you understand how can you channelize your energy in the right direction. So let's not talk about quant. Now, many actually companies or test prep companies say that, okay, for quant you need to do number properties first, or algebra first, then do word problems, then do geometry, like that. So they generally tell that, okay, focus on modules, individual modules, and go ahead. But trust me, in quant everything is interrelated. You cannot think about prime factorization which deal with powers if you don't know anything about exponents. Okay, so it's very important that you always understand the exponents as well when you come to prime factorization. Similarly, you cannot solve divisibility equations if you're not sure of how to solve equations. You cannot solve square root and quality equations that you come across in statistics. So you cannot do NP first and then go to algebra if you do not have the basic understanding of some essential topics. That is not possible. So the right sequence of studying for quant is that you should do the basic topics of each area in across the sections which are required in the other areas. Okay, Pranjali, I'm going to come to your point as well, and I honestly used to think just like you, but later on my thought process completely changed, to be honest, and that's when my score improved to 740. But I'll definitely take your point later on. So in quant, you have to first work on the basic topics for each area, okay, so that you understand what are the simple elements which are tested on the intermediate topics. So you should then go to the intermediate topics, and then you should go to the advanced topics. So it should be done in this way in quant, not module wise. And now you might ask, okay, what are the basic, intermediate, and advanced topics? So I've kind of listed them down in front of you. There are 33 topics in quant which are tested, and please make sure that you follow this exact order. This is the most precise order in which you should go about, and you can see that all topics which are related to number properties are in green, all topics which are related to algebra are in blue, all topics which are related to word problems are in red, and all topics which are related to geometry are in black. So you can see how I have mixed them all, because there is a strong interrelation between individual areas, and if you follow this order, this will help you learn and get the maximum out of it. Okay, and don't worry, you don't need to note this down. You can actually, I'll give you a very simple way of getting this thing for yourself very quickly. So I'll give you a very simple way of doing this. So don't worry about it. Don't start noting it down. But I just want you to understand how how you should actually arrange these topics in the right order. Okay, so this is the right sequence that you should follow for quant. All right, guys. So let's talk about sequence of studying for people who have already prepared. Because I remember there was one student, Diwali, who was talking about how should you focus on your weak and strong area. So that's a very good point. So let's talk about people who have already prepared, and I'm talking about people who have been preparing for 2 months or more, minimum of 2 months or more. If you have been preparing for less than that, it is better to follow the advice that I've given till now for verbal and quant separately. Okay, but if you have been preparing for 2 months already, then what you should do is probably take a module-wise diagnostic. For when I say module, I mean SCCR, RC, number properties, word problems, etc. So take module-wise diagnostics and divide your strong and weak areas into this bucket, like all the areas into strong and weak, by keeping a benchmark of 70%. So if you have more than 70%, like in any area, that is a strong area for you. If you have less than 70% in any area, that's a weak area for you. Okay, so that's how you go about doing it. So you take, let's say I took the test, and in SC my score was 90%, in CR my score was 60%, and in RC my score was 40%. Then the right sequence for learning should be, I should work on the weak areas first. So I should do CR, then RC, and then SC. But remember, guys, in your weak areas or your strong areas, for example, try to follow the sequence that I suggested. So if you can see over here, for example, this student is better in CR, but I'm still suggesting to do CR before RC, because in both the areas the student is weak. Okay, now if he is weak in both the areas, there is a possibility that his analytical reasoning skills can be poor. Now if his analytical reasoning skills are poor, then working on RC directly will be a mess. So in this case, he should first work on CR, build his analytical reasoning skills, take it out of the question, and then work on RC. That will help him much more. So always try to follow the order as close as possible within your strong and weak areas. You definitely need to start with the weak areas, but focus on this. And as I said, this is a strategy for people who have been preparing for more than 2 months. Okay. So after asking for the last slide. So after again, these are the sequence of the sections. If you want to take a screenshot of it, you can do it, but don't worry about the screenshot or noting it down. As I said, I'll be giving you a very simple option to get all this planned out for yourself in very simple way. Okay. So based on the sequence, once you have identified the sequence, once you have set the target scores, you need to then plan out that, okay, how much time do I need to put in on individual topics within SC, within CR, within RC, within quant? How much time do I need to put in? When should I complete each of them? So it's very important that you place all of this and create simple, clear targets and deadlines for you. Because from my experience, what I've seen is most of the people who start their prep around this time, around January or February, they end up missing their target. Okay, they end up missing their target date by a long time. Okay, so Nidhi is saying there is an irritating noise in the background. Could you solve that issue? I'm not sure, guys. Anyone else is facing this issue? Is there a noise in my background? Because I don't hear anything as such in the background. Overall, please say a yes or no. Is there a noise or something in my background which is constant? Quick yes, no, guys. Is there a noise in my background? Okay, I see no mostly. Okay, you guys can actually poll, send like your responses in the poll itself, guys. No need to type it in the chat. Okay, so I guess Nidhi, the problem is at your end. So please, like, try rejoining. Sometimes it's because of the network issues or something. So because 90% of the people don't say any problem is there, no noise is there. Okay, so maybe just try to rejoin Dawn. Maybe it's a problem with sometimes happens with the webinar jam tool. So just try to rejoin. It should help. Okay, so let me get back on track. So it's very important to have this clear targets. Why is it important? Because I see people starting their prep in a very enthusiastic way, but when you don't have any targets or clear deadlines in front of you, they fall off the grid. And they end up losing a lot of time, sometimes months and months for the entire prep. Okay, so it's very important that you put all these things into a planner, have clear targets, have clear deadlines for every single aspect. Okay, now when you want to create these deadlines and everything, your prep time can be anywhere between 100 to 350 hours based on multiple factors, but you need to create the deadlines based on the following things: your strengths and weaknesses, how much time is available with you to study every week. Because if you are not taking into account how much time is available with you to study every week, then many a times you will plan for something which is not achievable. Okay, then the right sequence of learning, that is also very, very important. And then the right content to study. How much content you have to study, what are the things that you need to do, which questions you need to solve. All of these factors are supposed to be taken into account when you are creating targets and create deadlines for yourself. Now, I'm sure many of you might be thinking, okay, how do I do this, Piyush? Please tell me, how do I do this? Because you're told about the sequence, I understand that, but which content to study, how much time do I take, when do I study quant, when do I study verbal, how much do I do in quant on a particular day? How much do I do in SC on a particular day? If all those questions are really bothering you, I'm making your life simple. At GMAT-Wiz, we have an AI-enabled study plan, AI-driven study plan, which is offered free of charge to all students. You can actually log in, create a free study plan for yourself using the link which I've just shared. And I'm going to just quickly share you how this really works. So in the AI-driven study plan, what happens is when you create a free trial account, when you use this link to create a study plan for yourself using a free trial account, it will initially ask you all questions that are required. It will ask you your current score. It will ask you the time available with you. It will ask you your target score. It will automatically use all those data points to create a simple weekly task list, a simple entire calendar for you. So as you can see over here, for this student, it is very clearly outlined. Again, this video is a little dated. I have made it long back. But you can see every single week what is supposed to be done. You can see what is to be done by 31st May. What is the milestone? The student has to complete quant foundations by then. By 18th June, the student has to complete quant intermediate and so on. You can see your entire journey panned out. You can even see what is supposed to be done on a specific day. And the best part about this calendar is it is personalized for you, and not just personalized for you. This calendar is completely integrated with the course content. So you can click on start button right away and actually start accessing the course. And let me tell you guys, this planner, this entire plan is free of charge. We don't charge anything for this plan. If you want to access the content, that content is limited access for the free trial users. So only the top gray area that you see with FT written, number properties FT, geometry FT, these areas are accessible to you in terms of content. The other areas that you see after that become accessible if you upgrade your account. But irrespective of that, the study plan, the entire planning part is free of charge for everyone. So if you want to create a free study plan, you can always click on the link which I shared and start it with yourself. And the best part about this is that this is planned for the entire journey. For the upcoming ones, all of that is planned for you. All of that is done for you. So you know you have a clear picture. And this is a plan which also gives you a weekly task list. So you can actually move to a task view, and that way you can see what are the tasks that you have to just complete in the current week. So you just focus on these tasks, you just do all of this properly, and all of this will be taken, all the platform will take care of your learning. And the best part about this is integrated with the course. So you don't need to worry when to do, where to do it from. Just click on the start button. It will take you inside where all the videos are there, all the quizzes are there, all of them are placed in the right place. And all this is adaptive in nature. And as I said, every week the plan is adapted based on your progress. It tells you how much you completed in the last week. It allows you to change the plan. In fact, now we have enabled new features. As I said, this is a slightly dated version of the plan. In new features, you can actually mix and match quant and verbal. Everything is possible with this planner. So if you really want a study plan, you can just quickly click on this link. So Abhishek, the link is on the top of the screen. I've just added it on. Okay. Sumit, they do fill plans only for verbal. Sumit, that's not really required. The plans automatically take care of that. You have an option of doing verbal first, quant first, or you can mix both of them as well. And in fact, there will be certain recommendations which will be given by the engine as well, based on your current and target scores. And if there is no score which we can use to determine that, we will be given the flexibility to determine that. It's an AI-driven platform. There are a lot of things which the AI is going to recommend you automatically. Okay, so Aditi, this plan is going to adapt basis improvement as well. Yes, it is going to adapt basis improvement also. Okay, so remember guys, planning is a very, very essential part of your entire studies. And trust me, the goal of doing an MBA without a plan is just a wish. You need to have a plan in place. You need to have a very what are the deadlines, what are the tasks, how am I completed, all of that should be clearly outlined. Unless that is done, it's just a wish. You have to convert it into a goal by creating a plan around it. Okay, so the planning part is clear to all of you. Quick yes, no guys, I just want to make sure that all of you are clear about the planning part. Then we can move to the execution stage, the next stage of our learning. Okay, quick yes, no guys, in the poll itself you can say. Apurv, I'll talk about the execution now. So you're talking about books, so I'll talk about the execution now. Honestly, I'm not a very big fan of books, to be honest, because books do not give you the right feedback. They're good for learning concepts, but not for learning the strategies. Okay, so I'm not really a very big fan. Books used to be a very good way of learning when we were young. Again, I'm not saying books are not great, but in the current world, like you have technology in everything, so it's better to use courses which use technology rather than just going for books. If books is something you are focusing on, then probably Manhattan and OG are pretty good overall. But for verbal, I would recommend PowerScore, CR, Bible, and Aristotle books are also good enough. The Manhattan books are not really catered for non-native speakers. But still, in any case, these books are limited on strategies. They do not provide you right strategies. But again, as I said, we'll talk about it in depth later. So good. So I'm really happy that all of you have understood the planning aspect. That is great to know. So let's get started with the execution part. Okay. So let's understand exactly how do you execute. And in order to understand how to execute, there are certain myths which I need to break, because these myths actually derail the entire prep of most of the students. Okay. So first thing is that first myth is that students focus on accuracy. In fact, I have come across many a times scenarios where students tell me that, okay, sir, when I was doing the official guide questions, I was getting more than 80% of them right. But when I take the mock test, my score is not even 50 percentile. How many of you have faced this scenario or heard this scenario? That when you do official guide questions, your score is around 80 percentile or 80%, your accuracy is around 80% rather. But when you're doing the mocks, your score suddenly falls. How many of you face that? Okay. I see 100% yes till now. So that's a very common thing which I hear. So that's the biggest problem. People think that accuracy is all that matters on GMAT, but that's not the only thing which matters. And I'm going to help you understand this from a very simple thing. We're going to use some ESR reports, enhanced score reports, which are given by GMAT to understand how the algorithm really works. Because many people don't understand how an adaptive algorithm works. And unless you understand how an adaptive algorithm works, many times it is very difficult for you to actually dissect your prep, understand where to focus on. So this is the enhanced score report, which I'm showing on your screen. And this is in fact my own enhanced score report. And this shows the accuracy in the verbal section. Okay. The accuracy in individual quarters of the verbal section. So in the first, the 8 questions which are considered over here in the first quarter, 7 in the second, 7 in the third, and 8 in the last. So there are a total of 30 questions which are scored on GMAT out of 36. The rest 6 of them are experimental questions. We don't know where they come. We don't know which one are experimental questions. There's no way of knowing which is experimental and which is scored. It's only known to GMAT. But what we definitely know is 30 out of 36 questions are scored, and they are divided in this way. So in simple terms, if I see in the first quarter, my accuracy was 75%. So what it means is I made 2 mistakes in the first quarter, 2 in the second quarter, none in the third quarter, and 3 mistakes in the last quarter. So the number of total mistakes which I made was 7. Okay. So let me bring this data on the side. So you have on the left-hand side my own ESR, which shows that I made 7 mistakes in the entire test on verbal. And on the right-hand side, you have another student ESR report, another student's ESR report, which shows that this student has made a total of 5 mistakes on the GMAT. Okay, just 5 mistakes. 3 in the first quarter, 1 in the second quarter, and 1 in the third quarter. Okay. Now, what I want you guys to do is, I want you guys to think about the score, the verbal score of this student. I'm not showing the verbal score of this student. Okay. Think about the verbal score of this student. And I'm going to quickly give you some options. You think in the meantime. Okay. I'm going to, and remember, with 7 mistakes, I got a verbal 41. So think about the verbal score of this student, and I'm going to get you a poll in the meantime. Quickly. To tell me what could be the verbal score of the student. Here is a poll in front of you guys. What is the verbal score of the second student? Can you make a guess or calculate it and tell me? I made 7 mistakes. I had a verbal score of 41. The other student has made 5 mistakes on the right side that you see. Can you guess the verbal score of the other student? And these are actual scorecards, right, guys? Okay, and remember, the more, like ideally, the lesser the number of mistakes, the higher your score should be. So my score was 41 with 7 mistakes. This student has made 5 mistakes. What do you think is the verbal score of this student? Apurv says 45. So Apurv, if you can again use 42 to 44, it was definitely not more than 44. That's why I've not given that option in the chat, in the poll. Okay, so I see the votes have stabilized more or less. Okay, so about 45% of you think that it should be either 41 or more. About 28% of you think that it should be 38 to 40. About 21% of you think it should be 35 to 37. And only 3% of you think that it should be 34 or less. The verbal score of this student was just 34, friends. Just 34. Okay, just 34. Not more than 41, not even close to 40. If we look at the percentile difference, it is huge. 93 percentile versus 71 percentile. Nice. And this is our actual scorecards. I have not manufactured them. These are actual scorecards for people who have taken the GMAT themselves. How many of you think that GMAT is really harsh as a test? How many of you are thinking that GMAT is a really harsh test? How is this even possible? How can you do this? 7 mistakes of 41, and then you're like another person is taking just 5 mistakes and you're giving a 34 to them. How many of you think that GMAT is a really harsh test? Okay, good point, Sumit. I'm going to come to that as well. In that we're going to look at why this happened as well. But how many of you think that GMAT is a harsh test? And trust me, guys, GMAT is one of the most standardized tests which is out there. It's not harsh. It actually is an adaptive test. And how an adaptive test is supposed to work, the adaptive test is supposed to understand what is a skill level, and based on that identifies what is like the right score for you. Okay, so Harshit, good question. How is the score calculated? The score is calculated not based on accuracy, but it is calculated based on the difficulty level of the questions that you're getting right. Okay, so in GMAT, it is not important to get a high accuracy. It is also important to get the right questions right. So what was the difference between the two students? If you see, and in fact, I had a word with this particular student, and she told me very clearly that she got the first 3 questions wrong. She was not filling in place. She was not filling in place, and she got the first 3 questions wrong for sure. She was almost sure about that, and that's what brought her score down, because she started on the wrong foot. The algorithm felt that even on the easy questions, she's not able to get them right, so she does not have the capability of getting the hard questions right either. And I'm going to show you very quickly the difficulty level chart of both the students. So if you look at the second quarter performance, so you might think that, okay, in the second quarter, I had a 75% accuracy. This student had an 86% accuracy. The accuracy is pretty good. The score should be high. But now correlate that with the difficulty level in the second quarter. The average difficulty level of the questions that I got right, the student the one got right in the second quarter, was medium to high, was medium high. But if you look at the average difficulty of the questions that the other student who got a 34 correct in the second quarter was just easy medium. If I bring them side by side, you can see the difference in the difficulty level of the questions that I was getting right versus what the other student was getting right. And that's why you see such a huge difference in the scores of the two students. Okay, so in GMAT, it is not just about accuracy. Even if you look at the third quarter results, you'll see a huge difference. Like my accuracy was 100%, high accuracy was 86%, but the average difficulty level of the questions that I was getting right was much more difficult. So the algorithm felt that this guy has the ability of getting the hard questions right, and that's why the difference in score. So remember, on GMAT, accuracy is not what matters. What matters on GMAT is your skill level. You need to build the right skills. You need to get the right questions correct. And skill is nothing but the ability to get a question of any difficulty level correct. It is not about getting a high accuracy. It's about getting questions from any difficulty level correct. You need to be capable enough of getting the easy, medium, hard, all 3 kind of questions correct. Obviously, in the hard questions, your difficulty accuracy might be a little lower, but the problem with official guides are there are a lot more easy and medium questions over there, not so many hard questions. And students don't look at that difficulty level when they are looking at accuracy. So that's something which is important. And if you're really trying to make things much more simpler for you, what does a score range of 550 to 650 signify? If you are in the score range of 550 to 650, what it basically means is you are doing the easy questions well. Like about 80% of them you're getting right. You're not 100% there. But in the medium question, you're only able to get 50 to 60% of them correct. Because of which, the algorithm does not serve you many hard questions, and your accuracy is also poor in the hard questions. So basically, what it means is, since you're getting the easy questions right, easy questions are ones which test you on direct concepts. So your conceptual knowledge is fine, but your application of these concepts is not as great, and that's why you're struggling with medium and hard questions. Okay, in order to get to a 700 plus, you would need to have a very high accuracy in both easy and medium questions, close to 90%, as close to 90% as possible. You cannot afford to get them wrong, because if you get them wrong, you won't be served the hard questions at all. So your conceptual understanding has to be great, but your application should also be great, because you need to get a 90% in medium questions. And then in hard questions, even if your score is 50%, your accuracy is about 50%, you can cross the 700 mark. With a 60% accuracy, you can reach up to a 720 mark. With a 70% accuracy, you can reach to a 740 mark, and so on. So what is your accuracy in the hard questions will determine how high will you go in this score range. Okay, but to take you to this score range, you need to get a very high accuracy in easy and medium questions first. Okay, so the approach to get to a 700 plus is simple. First thing you need to do is make the algorithm serve you hard questions. And how do you do that? You need to get a high accuracy on easy and medium questions. But the second thing that you need to do is you need to get the hard questions right as well, which is where most people struggle with. And in order to get the hard questions right, you need to learn the right skills. Now, what does skill mean? I've been talking about skills from a long time. Some of you might be thinking, okay, Piyush, you're talking about skill, but what does this skill really mean? Okay, skill is something which many people don't understand. Most people think that skills is all about concept plus practice, but it is not about concept plus practice, guys. It is about concepts plus application and then practice. Okay, this application part is what people miss. They don't understand what that application is. And let me help you understand this part with a simple example. So I'm going to take an example of how people learn sentence correction. Okay, and this is I'm able to say this because I have done this mistake as a student myself, and I've seen many people making these mistakes. Most people think that sentence correction is only about knowing the rules. It's mostly about knowing the rules. So how they approach sentence correction is they will take up individual topics. They will do subject verbs, they learn subject verb pair, all the grammar rules against it. There are exceptions to those rules. Then they will move to tenses. They will learn the rules for them. They'll move to modifiers, learn the rules for them. Pronouns they will do, parallelism they will do. They will do all these topics one thing at a time, learn all the grammar rules. And the good thing is they do well on individual questions. So when they are doing subject verb, they will do questions on subject verb pairs. They will get them right. When they're doing pronouns, they will do the pronoun questions. They learn the pronoun rules and they will get it right. But the biggest problem is they start getting the 700 level questions wrong. How many of you face this problem or have faced this problem as a student? How many of you have faced this problem as a student? That when you do individual rules, you learn individual rules, you get those questions right. But when you start doing the 700 level questions, you start getting them wrong. And please respond in the poll itself. There's a yes no poll which I have created. How many of you face this problem? Okay. I'll wait for a few more responses to come in, and I'll just request all of you to participate, because I just want to make sure that this is not a one-way communication, guys. So please respond to this poll. Okay. How many of you face this problem? Okay. Okay, so I have a decent number of votes. So let me end the poll. So more than 90% of you are facing this problem. And this is a very common problem. I also face this as a student. So the problem with this is, since your focus is on learning the rules, there is no common thread. There is no common learning thread, like, or application, or no strategy which is there, which tells you how do you apply these rules. So when you're doing individual rules, or you're doing questions on those specific rules, you know what kind of error you have to look for. And that's why you're able to get them right. But when there is no point, there's no guide in terms of which error you should look for, that's when people struggle. They are not able to identify those errors themselves automatically. Okay. And the biggest mistake that people do is, when they talk about learning application or strategies, they confuse strategies with shortcuts. They think, okay, in verbal, the right strategy is to get the question correct in 2 minutes, within 2 minutes. So they start looking at methods or strategies which are actually not strategies but shortcuts. And this is something which I did as a student myself. For example, in sentence correction, I started working on splits approach. My first focus was always on the answer choices, that, okay, let me identify the difference in the answer choices and think about the grammatical aspect of it, and then read the sentence, or quickly read the sentence once and then just look at the splits and apply the grammar rules. That is one shortcut which is very, very popular in the industry. In RC, for example, people do a lot of skimming. Okay, people do a lot of skimming. So Aditi, there is a little bit of background noise right now. I'll take care of it in couple of minutes. Don't worry about that. But I have a 2-minute break after this where you guys will be solving a question, and I'll actually get rid of the background noise. Don't worry about that. So skimming is something which is there as a problem in reading comprehension. Many people focus on just skimming the passage, quickly going through it, understanding what is there in the passage very quickly in 2 minutes, and then get back to the passage for every single question. And in data sufficiency, there is a big mistake that people do is that they quickly jump to the statements without even inferring the right thing from the question stem. So these are some shortcuts which people learn, and they don't realize that if you just focus on shortcuts without learning the right methodologies, it will actually create a problem for you. And again, it is very difficult for sometimes even as a student for me to relate to this. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to give you an official question to solve. And what I will do is once you solve this official question, after that, I'm going to solve this official question in front of you. And I'm going to help you. Like what I want you to understand is the difference between your approach and the right approach. Okay. So I'm going to create a poll and share it with you. You will have about 2 to 3 minutes to solve this question. So please solve this question at your end and please put your responses in the poll. Please don't put the responses in the chat so that other people don't see your answers. So please put the responses only in the poll over here. I've published the poll. So I'm going to be muted for about 2 to 3 minutes. In the meantime, please solve this question and then I'm going to show you how to actually solve this question. Okay, all the best, guys. All right, guys. So last 10 seconds, and I'm done. Then I'm gonna end this poll. I've already given you guys 3 minutes to solve this, so I guess most of you would have gotten enough time for it. So please put your responses if you haven't done so yet, because I'm gonna end the poll now. Okay, so I'm ending the poll now. So guys, tell me, how did you find this question? Was it easy, difficult? What was the feeling about this question? Maria, the question is a sentence correction question. You had to just pick the right answer logically. Okay, so again, that's probably you're not aware of the sentence, like the question format of sentence correction, but it's just that you have to understand which one of the options, if placed in the original choice, will make it the right one. Aditi says it was easy. Pranjal found it easy also. Don says decent. Guys, this is a 700 level question. So those of you who found it easy, and in fact, the accuracy is very, very poor. Most of you have got it wrong. More than 80% of you have got it wrong, actually. It's a very difficult question. It's a 700 level question, guys. If you did it easy, then probably you have missed something. Or you know it, that's good. If you found it easy, that's good if you got it right, for the right reason. But again, as I said, my objective right now is not to solve this particular question, but rather my objective is to help you understand the right method and how it is supposed to be solved. Now, most of the people, in fact, I'm talking just about the data which is driven from GMAT Club. Most of the people go with option C. Over here, 56% of you marked option C as the correct answer. In GMAT Club, where there are more than 1,000 responses to this question, 36% people mark C as the correct answer. 12% people mark A as the correct answer. Here, 15% of you marked A as the correct answer. And 10% people mark B as the correct answer. But the correct answer actually is option E, which only 15% of you have marked correctly. Okay. Aditi is not about the modifier concept that is being tested. Okay. Looks like the question deals with meaning clarity. Yes, Naval. Most of the questions, it's not A versus C. It's not A versus C, guys. Naval. E is the correct answer. A and C both communicate the same meaning. Okay. Let's understand this. Let's understand. And as I said, I'm not interested in solving this particular question. I'm rather interested in the approach. So let's see how I approach it. And I want you guys to think about how you approached it vis-a-vis how I am approaching it, and see the difference in the thought process. And then I will ask you the question in the end, that what is the difference that you saw in the thought process? Because the objective is to help you learn the right thought process. Okay. So let's see this. Let's read the sentence. A substance. So obviously the subject sentence is talking about a particular substance. Let's see what it is about. Derived from the Madagascar periwinkle. Okay. So in GMAT Viz course, again, those of you who are GMAT Viz student, they will know that whenever we see a verb-like word, we need to pause and understand whether it is a verb or not. Okay, that is something which we teach. So we have this habit of pause points. We use this concept of pause points in our course, where there are 4 pause points that we talk about, and we ask our students to pause at each of those points and ask relevant questions. So again, I'm not going into the depth of all of that, but since I see a verb-like word, I'll pause and I will ask myself, is this a verb or a modifier? Now, how do I know it? There are 2 tests for it. Since this is an ed verbal, as in this is the past form of the verb, I will first check if there is a helping verb in front of it. For example, if there was a helping verb, was or is, something like that, or has or something like that, then it is definitely a verb. But since there is no helping verb, I need to ask who is the doer of the action. Okay. The who derived of what derived. So obviously substance is not the doer of the action derived. So clearly this is not acting as a verb. This is a modifier that is providing me additional information about the substance. Okay? And again, I'm not getting into the depth of this concept. As I said, if you want to learn this concept, you can always look at our free trial. This concept is there in the free trial. So yeah, Aditi, it is a verb ed modifier. You can think of it like this. So what I know till now is a substance derived from the Madagascar periwinkle. So this substance, this is an additional information about the substance, that it is derived from the Madagascar periwinkle. Okay. Which has proved useful in decreasing mortality among leukemia patients. Now, what is this which talking about? This is another pause point that we recommend our students to pause at, relative pronouns. So think about what is this which talking about? Is it referring to substance or MP? Is it referring to the substance or Madagascar periwinkle? Can you guys tell me in the chat here? Is it referring to the substance or the Madagascar periwinkle? What has proved useful in decreasing mortality among leukemia patients? What do you think, guys? What do you think? What has proved useful in decreasing mortality among leukemia patients? Is it the substance or the MP? Aditi says it is the substance. Okay. Why can't it be MP? Dhaval says it is MP. Devik says MP. Pranjali says it is MP. Vinay says it is the substance. Okay. Radhakrishna says the substance. Didi also goes for substance. Don also goes for substance. So honestly speaking, the answer to this question is as ambiguous as your responses are. Some people are saying substance, some people are saying MP. It is ambiguous actually. I don't know which one of the two it is referring to because the way it is constructed. Since a relative pronoun generally modifies the noun which is closest to it, and it makes sense with Madagascar periwinkle as well. There's no harm in saying that the Madagascar periwinkle has proved useful. But if I go by logic and meaning, it's most likely the substance that has proved useful because the sentence is talking about that. But since the construction is done in a way that this entire thing is ambiguous, that's a very big problem with this choice. I don't know what is this which supposed to refer to. What has actually proved useful in decreasing mortality? Ideally, it should be the substance. Logically, that seems to be the case. But given this construction, I cannot be 100% sure because it can make sense with MP as well. Aditi, you can say in the current forms it refers to MP, but that's not always true. It has been found in GMAT questions also that this relative pronoun has jumped over certain prepositional phrases and other modifiers to refer to a earlier noun entity. It cannot jump over a verb form for sure, but it can jump over modifiers. So again, what is important to understand here is it is ambiguous over here. It is supposed to modify substance, most likely meaning wise. Grammatically, it seems to modify MP. It is all messed up. So I need to have clarity about what has proved useful in decreasing mortality. That is something which is not clear from the sentence as is. But let's still read further. Till now, what I understand is logically might be the substance which is derived from Madagascar periwinkle has found some usefulness in decreasing mortality among leukemia patients. Let's read further. Is cultivated in China as part of a program to integrate traditional herbal medicine. So now my question is, when I read this part of the sentence, I kind of get this question in my mind. What is really cultivated in China? Is it the substance or the MP that is cultivated in China? Can you guys tell me grammatically what is cultivated in China? Grammatically, what is cultivated in China? It is the is it the substance or the MP that is cultivated in China? Tell quickly, guys, in the chat, grammar part of the sentence. Okay, let's see some responses, some more responses. Okay, most of you are saying MP. Some of you are saying substance. Nikunj is saying substance. Dhaval says MP for sure. Diago says MP for sure. Okay. Good, guys. I'm so happy to see this response. Most of the people are not able to catch it. It should be MP, but the substance cannot be cultivated. But if you look at the subject verb pair, you need to understand this, that this is cultivated is actually referring to a substance. So this is the subject verb pair that is there. So this sentence is illogically telling me that a substance is cultivated. So grammatically, it is not referring to Madagascar periwinkle. This Madagascar periwinkle, this entire thing is a modifier, which is giving me just additional information about the substance. If you look at grammatically, the is cultivated is basically referring to a substance. A substance is cultivated in China. All the other pieces of information are just additional information about the substance. Okay, but meaning wise, we cannot say a substance is cultivated. It's illogical to say a substance is cultivated. A substance can never be cultivated. It is most likely the Madagascar periwinkle that is cultivated. And try to understand the meaning aspect, guys. A substance is cultivated in China as part of a program to integrate traditional herbal medicine into contemporary system of healthcare. We have been talking about integration of something which is traditional herbal medicine. Okay, what is a herbal medicine? Herbal medicine is something which is derived from plants. right? Which is created from plants, which is made out of plants. Think of it entirely in this entire sentence. What could be a plant? What could be a plant in this entire sentence? There's only one entity in this entire sentence that could be a plant, which is Madagascar periwinkle. And that plant should be cultivated. We cultivate plants. We don't cultivate substances. Getting my point, guys? So tell me very quickly in this yes no poll over here, how many of you were able to identify that there is an error that a substance cannot be cultivated? It is the Madagascar periwinkle that should be cultivated. How many of you were able to identify this error when you were solving the question, not when I started analyzing it? When you were solving the question, were you able to come up with this error? Quick yes no, guys. Were you able to come up with this error? And this is the entire meaning focus. Many a times when I solved this question, I gave this question to some students to solve. They say that, okay, how am I supposed to know that Madagascar periwinkle is a plant? How do I know that it can be cultivated, but the substance cannot be cultivated? I say, think about the meaning, guys. Look at the entire content. Look at the entire context. Unless you do that, you cannot do it. Okay? Trust me, GMAT does not test your understanding outside knowledge of that subject. Okay, so what did you find was the difference in your approach and my approach over here? What is the difference that you guys saw in your approach vis-a-vis my approach? And I want to see your responses, because otherwise all of this was a waste of my time and energy. So I just want to make sure that the point has gotten across to you. So what did you find was the difference in my approach and your approach? Please write in the chat. In the meantime, I'm going to go forward with our discussion. So there are two errors. One is which is referring ambiguously to MP and substance. The second is cultivated does not make sense with a substance. It is incorrect to use it. Okay, these are two big errors which are there. Okay, so the correct answer is choice E, because the choice E says the Madagascar periwinkle is cultivated in China. Okay, and it also clarifies a derivative of which has proved useful. So both the things are made correct by choice E, and that's why it's the correct answer. Choice C still says a derivative is cultivated. So that's what is incorrect about choice C. Okay. Dhaval says focus on meaning clarity. Okay, good point, Dhaval. I'm so happy to hear that. What about others? Did any one of you see any other difference, guys? Again, I've put a lot of effort to explain this to you, so I don't want it to go waste. So what did you find as a difference? Okay. Apurva, again, I'm not going to explain why D is wrong, because my objective is not to just answer this question. My approach is to tell you the method overall. Okay. But in simple terms, D does not have a verb. D has a verb missing for a lot of things. Again, there are other errors as well with D, but yeah. Radhakrishnan says, yours is a step-by-step approach. You break every single line and you consider the non-underlined portion as well. Good point, Radhakrishnan. So happy to see this. Ranji says, you analyze the sentence word by word. I looked at a few keywords. Good. Same mistake as Pranjali. Good, Harshit. Happy to know that. Approach is what Yash says. Yes, and that's what the biggest difference is. I speak to many students on a daily basis. I ask them, okay, how are you solving SC? You should actually use the meaning-based approach to solve SC and you will get it right. People say, yes, sir, I have been using the meaning-based approach. And then I ask them to actually solve a question right in front of me. And when they do it, to my utmost surprise, and that's something which I was really surprised by initially, but then later on I kind of found it so very common that I'm no more surprised about it. That when they focus on meaning, they just focus on certain aspects of it. They will just focus on 5 words or 6 words, and most of the people read the entire sentence as one go. And that's a sheer wastage of time, because when you read it entirely in one go, you come back to it again, break it again, read it again. And when you're coming back to it again, you only focus on certain aspects. That's the problem that lies. I approach it very methodically. I break it down. I contextualize as I read. I make sure that I think about the entire meaning. I relate everything in perspective. And that's what you are supposed to do. And trust me, guys, I used to tell myself that in GMAT, there are 2 close answer choices, and I get 2 close answer choices. And I've seen this happening with many students. People tell me I'm stuck between 2 choices. But many a times as a student, we don't tell this to others, but many a times as a student, we feel that Both answers could be correct on GMAT. Both the answers that I picked could be correct. It's just that you have to pick the best choice. In fact, many test prep companies also tell that you have to pick the best choice, but it is incorrect to say it. In GMAT, there is always one right answer and 4 wrong answers. There are no gray areas whatsoever. Remember, when you're picking the wrong answer, you're making 2 mistakes. You're accepting what is wrong. You're also missing something that is right. Okay, Pranjali, I'm going to talk about RC as well. Please hold on to that. So again, remember guys, skills are not about concepts or practice. If you continue practicing using the wrong methods, it's not going to take you anywhere. You need to learn how to understand the meaning and how you do that. So we talked about the wrong meaning learning curve, where you kind of focus on all the concepts. You learn the concepts, but there is no common thread between them. The only common thread between all the concepts that is tested on GMAT is meaning. Meaning is the common thread that binds all of them. So you should first focus on learning how do you get the meaning out of a sentence, even before you get into individual topics. That's the first thing that you need to do. Similarly, Pranjali, when you are doing RCs, even before learning what is inference or what is main point or any concept around it, you need to understand how do you read a passage. What are the things that you need to do in a passage? That's what is important. I'm going to talk back about that once again, but let's focus on sentence correction now. So the first thing that you need to do is focus on meaning. And that is one of the very, very important aspect that we focus on as a part of our course. So I'm going to show you some snapshots of how you should go about doing this. And if you take our course, you can do it on our platform. If you don't take our course, you still have to do it because that's the right way of doing it. So what we do is we help you master the meaning approach first. So you can see this is the snapshot of the sentence correction part of our course. Okay, this can be seen if you have already created a free trial account. You can go to the study plan menu. From there, you can go to the course tab on the top and you can see the course structure. So if you have a free trial account, you can see a lock icon. You won't be able to access it, but when you upgrade it, you will be able to access it. But at least you can see the course structure. So what we are doing here is in unit 1 of sentence correction itself, we have about 8 hours of lesson dedicated just to teach you how to understand the intended meaning without thinking about any grammar rules, any grammatical terminologies whatsoever. How do you identify what are the minimum things in a sentence? How do you break down a sentence? Where to pause? What kind of questions to ask? How do you integrate all of that and come to the understanding of the meaning? That is something which we focus on in the first part. Okay. So it is very, very important that you do this. And after, if you're actually struggling with that, that is where the entire unit 1 comes into picture. It makes it easy for you to relate the context. And once you have understood the meaning, the first thing is meaning. Once you have understood how to get the meaning of any sentence, then what we do is, and what you are supposed to do is, after you have understood how to get a meaning of any sentence, you're supposed to go into individual topics. So this is, let's say, topic 1. Okay, this is topic 2. This is topic 3. This is topic 4 and topic 5. And learn all these rules. Learn these rules from meaning standpoint. Okay, don't learn these rules from grammar standpoint. Don't think, okay, let's say, for example, that a past perfect tense is supposed to help you sequence 2 past related events. Understand why is it supposed to do that? Because unless you understand the rules also from a meaning standpoint, you will not be able to apply those rules when you think about the meaning. The best part about the meaning-based approach is, if you know the rules also from a meaning standpoint, you can actually get to the errors right when you start thinking about the meaning. It automatically comes to you and you will waste very little time in the option choices. Okay, so we make it a point that we teach you all the rules from a meaning perspective itself. So make sure when you are learning also, you always learn all the rules from a meaning perspective. Otherwise, the meaning-based approach is not going to work for you. In fact, the same has to be done for RC and CR also. So for example, Pranjali, you were talking about RC. So in our unit 1, we have 9 hours of lesson. If you can see, you can just add these numbers yourself. There are 9 hours of lessons just dedicated to help you understand how to read a passage. How do you take care of How do you place yourself in the author's place? How do you take care of passages which you are not comfortable with? How do you take care of transition words? How do you take care of opinions? What are the questions that you need to ask? How do you draw paragraph summaries? And then only we get into individual areas to teach you, individual question types to teach you how to apply this methodology there. So this is how you're supposed to follow a methodical approach, how you're supposed to develop a methodical approach along with the concepts to learn. Okay, so let me ask a very quick question, guys. Is this part clear to all of you? Quick yes, no in the poll here. I have a poll. Is this part clear to all of you? How do you approach? How do you develop a methodical approach? Quick yes, no in the poll. In the meantime, you respond. These are the best methods that work in individual areas. Overall, please let me know if you are clear about how to master the methodological approach as you're learning in your execution phase. Okay. Good. I see a lot of responses. So Yash, all in our courses, all the concepts that are taught to you are through video lectures. It consists of questions also, a lot of questions, a lot of concept boosters. So I'll talk about concept boosters as well. So I'll talk a little about the other aspects as well. But yeah, any other doubts about the approach part? Please feel free to let me know in the chat here. I see 95% of you are clear about it. But any other doubts around the approach part, guys, please feel free to let me know. And that is something which you have to do for quant as well. Again, I'm skipping this part because we're running slightly behind schedule. But this is very, very important that you build the right approach. You know the right methodology to solve the question. Okay. Could you please tell us a little about quant as well, strategies involved? So again, Pranjali, the methodologies in quant are generally different for different areas. It is generally common for a question type. For example, in BS, you have to draw inferences from the question stem before you move forward. So I'll quickly tell you about this. So with respect to the methodology, what we have done is we have came up with a very unique concept. I'll talk about that. But what is the biggest mistake that people do? They think that practice makes a man perfect. So what they do is, after learning a concept, they will practice questions and take mock tests. But what you need to understand is you don't learn from the questions, you actually learn from the solutions. So the error which people make is, when they are learning, they only review the questions that they get wrong. They only review the solutions for the questions that they get wrong. And this is a common mistake which is done by most people who don't improve their scores. And even when they're reviewing the solutions, they only spend time on option analysis. So let's say you marked choice D instead of choice E. You will only be bothered when you read the solution. You will only be bothered about the explanation for choice D and choice E. Very, very few people spend time on understanding, analyzing how they arrive at that choice. How very few people focus on the analysis of the question stem. And if you do this, you will not find a significant improvement in your score. And that's why we believe that for every topic, when I see a topic, I mean prime numbers, modifiers, anything, any topic from quant, any topic from verbal, anything you can think of. Every topic should be learned in 3 stages. First stage, you should learn all the concepts around it. Okay. First stage is learn all the concepts around it. Second stage is learn a methodical approach to solve the questions. And third stage is practice questions on the topic. If you follow all 3 stages, you will be able to get a 700 plus for every topic. But most people directly jump to practicing questions after learning concepts. That is the biggest mistake that they do, and they end up getting stuck in the 600 to 650 score range. So it is very important that you focus on the solutions. So how do you do that? How do you learn from the solutions? So first thing you need to do is refer to solutions which follow a consistent and logical method. You need to refer to solutions which have consistent and logical methodology. This is very important. If you are referring to solutions which use different method for different questions, you're not gonna learn the method. You have to look at solutions which are consistent, number 1. Number 2, logical also. They should not be using splits for SC, because that's something which will not work for non-native speakers. They should not be using shortcuts for solving questions. They should be using logical methods, because sadly there are no shortcuts on GMAT. The second thing that you need to do is verify each question irrespective of whether you get it right or wrong. Even if you get it right, even if you get it right, you still need to verify your solution with the solution to make sure that the method that you used is same as the method that is supposed to be used, because you might have gotten that particular question right because you were lucky. And if you do not refer to the solution, you will not get a very important lesson from that particular question which you were supposed to get. So please make sure that you are always referring to the solution properly, okay, even if you get it right. And then spend 80% of your time reviewing the sentence, argument, or passage analysis. Don't just read the option choices. My dear friends, as I said today also, I showed you how to solve it using meaning. Please make sure that you are doing 80% of your time you're spending there, and note down the variances in your approach so that you can master the right approach. Remember, this part is very, very critical. And I'm just going to show you how to do it. I'm showing you an example live from our course. So this is a CR question which is in front of you. Okay. I'm going to give you 1 minute, 1.5 minutes just to read the question prompt. Okay. When I say question prompt, I mean this argument over here, this entire argument. Take 1.5 minutes, read this entire argument, and then I'm going to show you how to review the solutions. I don't want you to solve this question. Okay. Please read the entire argument, and then I'm going to show you how to review the solution. So you have 1 minute. I'm going to be muted for this 1 minute. All right, guys. So I guess all of you have read the question stem. Okay. So again, I don't want you to solve this question, but I wanted to understand how to review the solutions. So again, this is a question from our course, and this is the solution from our course. So just to give you an idea, how do you analyze it? So for example, what we do is in this question, like in the argument analysis, we first tell you how to analyze the stimulus and question stem. So in the argument analysis, we tell you, okay, after you have read the first sentence, this is the inference that you should have come to. The total area of cultivated land is equal to total area of unexplored land. So when you are going through the solution, you will ask yourself that when I read the first sentence, and just the first sentence, not the second sentence, when I read the first sentence alone, did I come to this inference or not? If you did not come to this inference, then there is a mistake that you have made. There is a scope of improvement. Okay, that is there. Then you read the analysis of the second part, that okay, after I read the second portion, second sentence, did I come to this inference by combining the pieces of information in the first and the second sentence or not? If you did not, then you are still not reading it properly. Similarly, you will read the inference that can be drawn after reading the first 3 sentences and so on. So it is very important that you do this, guys. And that's why I said these are the 3 steps of learning that are required. Okay. And to help you learn the right methodology, Pranjali, we have come up with this idea of concept booster. Now, what is a concept booster? In the concept booster is a file which is given to you in the second stage, this stage basically. So first stage of your learning of any particular topic is a video lecture. We teach you all the concepts, all the method, all the formulas, all the rules in video lectures. And step 2 is to teach you how to apply the methodical approach using the concept booster. So let me tell you what is the concept booster. So in the concept booster, we take up multiple questions covering all different varieties of questions that can appear on GMAT from that particular topic. And you only get to solve one question at a time. Right after you solve that question, you will see a detailed solution as you saw earlier. And you are supposed to do exactly this even if you're not preparing using GMAT quiz. You might as well find it a little difficult to find a consistency, but at least make sure that you're doing this. Solve one question at a time, analyze the solution, and identify gaps in your methodology. and then only do the next question, so that you're able to improve upon the method as you do it. Okay, and each question in the concept booster is handpicked and covers a different aspect. And as I said, the typical learning curve in GMAT-Viz is for every topic, whether it is primes, modifiers, verbal, quant, whichever topic you take up, you first learn all the concepts using video lectures, then you learn the application using concept boosters, and finally you practice the questions using a practice quiz. Okay, so remember, these are 3 stages of learning in your execution that you need to focus on. And Sumit has a question. Sumit says, after learning from GMAT-Viz, do we need to practice from official guide also? Is it mandatory? So Sumit, in every topic, you will have a lot of quizzes which are GMAT-Viz GMAT-Viz questions. But along with that, we also give you a list, a question reference number of official guide questions that you should be solving. So for example, let's say you have done prime numbers. So after you're done with prime numbers, based on your performance, the AI will recommend that you should open question number 142, 178, 196 from OG, let's say 18 or OG 19 or whatever, and solve them right away. So we give you a list of official guide questions that you should be solving. We cannot provide you the questions because they are copyright of GMAT, but we do tell you what are the official questions that you should be solving at that moment. Okay, so I recommend doing it as the AI suggests, because doing those official questions brings a lot more confidence in you. It's not like you have to mandatorily do it, but when you solve official guide questions, you get a little more confidence than solving questions which are created by GMAT-Viz. It's not like our questions are not official styled, but it's just that it gets you more confidence. Every question on GMAT-Viz platform is actually based on official question, and I'm 100% sure if you do well on our questions, you will definitely do well on OG. But I would still recommend doing the OG just to build that confidence level. Okay, so that brings us to the end of execution stage. So execution, that is how you need to focus on concepts and application at the same time. Now let's talk about the assessment stage. Okay, now when you are assessing your performance, what you should assess yourself on? First thing, when you're actually, the criteria for assessment should be dependent on which phase of learning you are in. So if you remember clearly, I talked about 2 important phases of learning initially, and then the mock phase also is there. The first phase is learning phase, where you learn the concepts and application, both. The second phase is fine-tuning phase. In your first phase, when you're learning the concepts and application, your focus should be on learning the right method. Your focus should not be on timing at all. Trust me, guys, if you are using the meaning-based approach for the first time, you will not be able to solve questions within a couple of minutes. Initially, you will take 3 minutes, 2.5 minutes, or sometimes even 4 minutes. I remember when I started using the meaning-based approach, I used to take even 4 or 5 minutes to solve each question. Many a times it used to happen. Okay, but the moment I solved 100 odd questions using the methodology, I was able to reduce the time automatically. In fact, on GMAT, I was able to solve each SC question within 1 minute 15 seconds, and my percentile on SC was 94. So initially, your timing will not be good when you're learning a new method, and that's true for any new skill that you learn. Remember that part. So initially, don't start focusing on timing. Focus on timing when you move to the fine-tuning stage. Why I say so? Because if you start focusing on timing too soon, then your focus will shift away from learning, and your score will end up stagnating at 600 to 650. So make sure you're focusing on the accuracy and making sure that accuracy is coming with the right methodology. If you learn the methodology, timing is a natural outcome of it. And always remember that you should master one topic before moving on to the next one, because many a times what happens is, if you actually move on to another topic which is more advanced in nature, and you're struggling with the more foundational topic, you'll not be able to do justice on the advanced topic either. And that's when you will circle back to the basic topic once again, wasting a lot of time and energy. So in the very first place, when you actually do a topic, make sure you're doing well on it before you move on. How do you know that? Simple thing to do is, before moving on to from a topic to another, take a topic-wise test, find out your strengths. In case there are any weaknesses, work on the weak areas right away. Identify the conceptual gaps and work on it. But the problem is, most students are not able to identify the conceptual gaps themselves, because there are no tools which are available in the market which does it for them. And that's when the issues pile up, and later on they come to a realization that they are not doing well on this area. And that's when we actually came up with this idea of AI-enabled improvement modules, real-time improvement modules. So how our platform really works is, at the end of each topic, you'll see a practice quiz. When you take this practice quiz, see, this is the last topic, right? Last thing right now in this topic, triangles. But when you're taking this practice quiz, you complete your test. Let's say you take the entire test, and once you submit it, the AI will run in the backend. It will identify what is your strengths and weaknesses. It will look at which option choices you have marked. It will analyze your strengths and weaknesses, identify relevant content for it, which things talk about those weak areas. It will take out video lectures from the course. As you can see, there are certain videos which are taken out by the AI, which focus on my weak areas. It will even create a quiz, focus on those weak areas, and you can add it right away to your course. If you select and add it right away to your course, it will automatically get appended in real time. Those improvement models will be added to your course. As you can see below practice quiz, now there are some short videos which are there. These are focused on my weak areas, and an additional quiz so that you can right away apply those learnings in real time. So all of this is a part of our platform that we offer. So make sure that you are improving on every single topic before you move on to the next one. The last stage is your optimizing stage. Now, where does optimizing stage come into picture? It comes into picture, and this is kind of common with your fine-tuning stage. Okay, this is like a fine-tuning prep part of the prep. So when you're done with, let's say, sentence correction, for example, you take a module-wise test, maybe 1 or 2 quizzes with 15 to 30 questions in each of those quizzes, and identify areas in which your score is still less than 60%. So let's say in SC, you took this quiz after completing sentence correction, and you realize that your score is less than 60% in modifiers and parallelism. So you need to optimize these areas, focus on improving these areas. Now, how do you create those quizzes? Again, we have the option in our platform. We have option of taking sectional tests. You can take this for geometry, word problems, algebra independently, or for verbal, for example. And you can actually use our dashboard where you have the analytics, which shows you exactly what is the score in individual areas. So you can click on number properties here. You can see what is the performance in each area. You can select algebra, see what is the performance, what are the top areas to improve right away. So if you're using GMAT-Wiz, it takes care of your error log. You don't need to worry about it. It even shows you what is the performance across difficulty levels and all of it. So first thing is identify the weak areas that are there, and then improve your weak areas. Now, how do you improve your weak areas? Quickly revisit the concepts on those areas from the course or whatever resources you're using. Then solve and review questions. Solve some additional questions from Quizart, which is our quizzing platform, and review the solutions. Focus on learning the application when you're doing so. And remember, guys, when you're working on your weak areas, don't go after solving tons and tons of questions. Focus on quality. That is much more important than quantity. I'll tell you about one of my students. His name is Ravi. This guy came to us when he scored just a 520 on GMAT. Before scoring a 520, he actually solved about 3,000 plus questions from GMAT Club. Study a lot. Okay, and after coming to us, he only solved 900 questions on verbal. And I'm just talking about verbal here because he was struggling a lot with verbal, and he was able to still improve his score to a 760. Okay, give it a thought, guys. So it's not just about the number of questions that you solve, it's about learning from each question. So when you're working on your weak areas, please make sure that you're learning from each and every question. Okay, and once you have optimized your weak areas, you have improved on your weak areas, then take sectional tests. Sectional tests are like sectional tests for verbal, for quant, just to build your capability, just to get your timing in place and all of that. Do sectional tests on verbal and quant, and then only go for mock tests. Don't take mocks before it. And if you do this properly, then you just need to take 4 or 5 mocks. And when you're doing the mocks, your focus should be on learning the right test taking strategy. And that right testing. So this is about it. You can rep. We are now moving on to the Q&A session of the webinar. So feel free to let me know if you have any questions around your prep, any other questions that are there in your mind. Feel free to let me know. I'll be more than happy to take them up and answer your questions which are there. Okay. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions. You can always reach out to me on piyush@gmatwiz.com. That is my email ID. And if you want to schedule a discussion with me, you can schedule a discussion with me also using a link which I'm going to share quickly over here. So you can schedule a discussion with me using this link, and you can also reach out to me on WhatsApp on the given number. Please let me know what questions you have. Pooja is saying, is getting a good score in GMAT and compensate for low GPA in bachelor's? Pooja, generally, yes. If you have a low score in bachelor's, a good GMAT compensates for it because it shows your academic potential to the schools. So it says, after quant verbal, how much buffer time should we give for practice marks and before actual GMAT? So think of it like this, Sumit, that depending on your prep, about 50 to 100 hours is required after completing quant and verbal. That is the buffer time that you need to have approximately. And just an approximate number, it depends on how well have you prepared till then. Okay. I don't see any other questions till now. Please feel free to ask me any other questions that you have in mind. I'll be more than happy to help. Okay, Sumit, happy to know that this session helped. Thank you, Pooja. Comments? Okay. Great. So I hope I don't see any other questions from you. So I hope the session was helpful to all of you. So please feel free to get in touch with me later on as well. If you don't have any questions right now, later on also, if you have some questions, feel free to reach out to me on this contact details, which I shared a little while earlier. Okay. Great, Harshit. Happy to know that you don't have any other questions. Okay. Great, guys. So all the best for your prep. I'm gonna redirect you to the website. If you want to register for a free trial, you can do that. Thank you so much, Radhakrishnan. Thank you, Vinay. Thank you, Samapit. Thank you so much. I'm glad to know that the webinar helped. Thank you so much.